Hello and welcome to the current episode of Unboxing Russia, to the new season. My name is Pradnya, and together with Ekaterina ШУЛЬМАN, we are going to try to unbox, unpack quite a few things about Russia and some things about India. So we took a long break, a summer break, which was well deserved.
So the start of the new season is all the more welcome, I hope, for our esteemed audience as much as for ourselves.
Yes. And just because we've been away from the camera doesn't mean we haven't been working. I think the things happening around the world have kept us busy, in your parts, in my parts, and in the part that we actually live in right now. So let's start at the beginning, in the sense of we left it off in August, addressing quite a few things that had happened in the run-up to August, including India, Pakistan, but also things happening within Russia. And now let's pick it up from there. So let's begin with what's happening in Russia.
And before we do that, our attentive viewers will notice that we don't have the teapot at the moment.
That's true.
Which is due to so many reasons, including the new studio that we are currently inhabiting, but also increased tariffs on all things Indian, which have played havoc, for example, with an online provider that I buy my own tea from. So I haven't yet figured out whether I can afford to drink tea any longer. That was an overstatement. If there's another statement, that was an overstatement. I will keep drinking tea, even if I buy it with my very last money. But still, you see how things that may seem theoretical and far away, and actually part of your doom scrolling bad habit, can actually
have an impact.
Yes, a very direct and concrete impact on the innocent details of your daily life. So can we still have tea from India?
I think so. I think you probably will have to shell out a little more money.
Even if I'm not in the US.
Or maybe I bring it for you when I go to India.
That's one thing. A friend of mine recently went to Nepal and she brought me some.
Yeah, and that's a good promise to make, because today is also Diwali. It's the biggest festival that the majority part of the population in India celebrates. So today's the first day.
Is it the Festival of Light?
Yes.
It is.
So in the current times of doom and gloom, I think we always could use some sense of little shimmer and glimmer of hope. So on that note, I will bring you some tea.
Very good. And maybe we can have some candles next time. How long is the festival? I know your festivals
till about
quite long.
Till Thursday.
That's not too long.
No.
Okay. So candles, what else?
Lots
Cookies.
of sweets, lots of food, families coming together, friends coming together. So
what's not to love?
No.
And the season, at least here in Berlin and generally in Central and Eastern Europe, the season is such a one as calls for as many candles and sweets and people coming over and tea as you may possibly afford.
And I think your motherland has contributed quite a lot right now to the doom and gloom here in this part. We need more light.
That's our national produce. No tariffs imposed. We produce doom and gloom in quantities larger than we can consume internally. So we export some of it to those unfortunate enough to be our neighbors. But we keep a very sizable proportion for our internal consumption as well. So what has been happening in
Russia today?
Back at home. Actually, the very last piece of news that I caught on my way here was exactly about Russia Today, the Russian state information company. So the FSB has uncovered a plot to kill the head of Russia Today, Margarita Simonyan. This killing was to be carried out at the instigation of Ukrainian secret services, of course, but practically it was to be carried out by 11 people, 2 of whom are underage and the others are almost school children. So this group of children communicated with somebody on the internet, and the allegations are that they actually took or hoped to take $50,000, a ridiculous sum for such an assignment, to, well, kill the person. At the first glance, and I'm afraid at the second glance as well, this looks to me like one of those covert operations that the FSB is so fond of, because they are easy, harmless, they incur no risk for themselves, and they produce an impression on their top management and so on, political leadership as well.
But do you think this is a reliable piece of news? that the plot
Well,
has...
that these poor young people will be imprisoned for more years than they have lived in the world, that is reliable. That I think is very true.
But at the behest of Ukraine or whosoever, it could also be
You
at
know,
the behest of other non-state actors within Russia.
You know what the FSB does? They organize Telegram chats or channels or groups on the web, and they entice stupid or undereducated or just excitable young people to enroll into what they may think is some battalion for the liberation of Russia or Ukraine or both, or as the case may be, a plot to do whatever. So it's a classic police provocation. That's what they do time and again. So,
but also ties in well with your favorite topic of conspiracy theories. So you take one sliver of truth, and then you construct a narrative
around it,
that draws in people.
And then you draw in real people and ruin their lives, and young people too. So this is pretty heartbreaking. But this is what the FSB does. In a sense, this is what secret police, political police around the world tends to do. But in other countries, it is under some sort of civic control or legal control or parliamentary surveillance, so they can't have the full freedom to exercise their favorite fancies. But in Russia, they govern themselves. So their only goal is to cook up something that will please the president. And after 25 years, they know pretty well his tastes and his peculiar inclinations and habits, so they can cook up whatever they can sell to him. Selling threats and challenges and getting additional budgetary allocations is administrative business of the first water. This is what every bureaucratic structure intends to do and loves to do. The only difference is whether there is control, whether there is some sort of checks and balances, whether there's any sort of balance, or there's just bureaucracy running amok. And this is, unfortunately, is the case with Russia. Speaking of budgetary allocations, budgetary process is underway, and this is the time when we, the Russia watchers, with the experts, can get a chance to see some of the real intentions of the state rather than rhetoric or informational operations or intentional propaganda. So what's happening with the budget? Traditionally, Russian budget, as far as its spending is concerned, stands on 3 legs. Can anything stand on 3 legs?
Sometimes.
Yeah. So leg number 1 is called national economy. National economy means money sent to the regions from the center. For the purposes, the official formula is balancing of budgetary and financial discrepancies. So this is to make the regions more equal. The minority of Russian regions are the donors. The majority are the recipients. So these national economy articles, they are for allocating money to the regions.
And create an equilibrium. In a
some sort of equilibrium.
In an ideal scenario.
In an ideal scenario, something of this sort ought to have been happening. Only in a real federation that is not so heavily centralized as today's Russia is, not such a large proportion of the regional money is not taken to the center in order to be brought back then to them as Moscow desires. But things being what they are, this is entirely the matter that the federal center decides for itself. The governors are only nominally elected. Regional legislative bodies have no powers. So almost the only business of a regional administration is to regularly visit Moscow in asking for additional budgetary transfers for their own region. And the governor is judged to be efficient or not so efficient for his job as far as he is able to come back home with a chunk of federal money in his teeth. But this federal money is actually their money. Only first it has to be all brought back to this one big Moscow money bag, and then you can beg to be allowed your own share. So this is national economy. The second foot is social spending. And social spending is mostly pensions, the pension fund, which is now the Unified Social Fund, and also other articles like healthcare and education and the like. And this has been, in some years it's been shrinking, in other years it's been kept the same as in a previous budgetary year, which is de facto shrinking because of the inflation and the lower value of the ruble. And the alarming sign is the information that this pensionary fund has suddenly discovered a large gap in its financial calculations. Russia is in a dangerous place demographically because we have a large demographic strata retiring, already retired, and a much smaller one now on the labor market. We have low birth rates, but of course, people who are just born are also a heavy weight on the governmental spending rather than contributing to it. So we have a little less than 2 working people per one pensionary, which is borderline bearable, manageable, but it's not just pensionaries who need to be supported by these working people, but also the children. So the pension fund finds itself in a precarious situation. Generally, the budgetary situation can be, I think, described in these terms. It's still manageable. The federal welfare fund is almost spent, but not quite. The income, which is mostly from selling hydrocarbonates, is lower, but still high enough to pay for the war and security spending, but we are tottering on the brink, I would say.
So that will fall under social spending, the war effort money?
So the third food used to be national security and defense. Now it's defense and national security. It's about 39% of overall national spending. Again, defense plus defense, which is now actually more of an offense, plus security. The military spending per se, again, as far as we can judge, because while I tell you all this, you have to keep in mind that about 30% of federal budget is now secret. So it's
30%.
Yes,
That's a huge
28 to be exact. 28.
And
29.
what do you mean it's a secret?
These are the so-called closed articles of the federal budget. So they are not discussed on plenary sessions. They are not discussed on the budgetary committee. They are discussed by a special commission that mostly consists of State Duma deputies with past careers in security or the army, and they meet, well, secretly. So we don't know what is there. But this, of course, creates difficulties for expertise. But while we don't know the figures...
And what was, sorry, I'm interrupting. What was the figure last time when the budget was negotiated?
You mean the amount
last
of
iteration?
secrecy?
Yeah, so like right now you said it's 28% of the national budget is...
No. I say that 28% of the national budget is now the so-called closed articles.
Yeah, so what was it earlier?
Previously, it's been creeping up during previous 10 to 15 years. It used to be something like 14 to 16.
So, but still, that's a massive jump.
Yes, it wasn't a jump. It was a slow process. So it's not like it happened in 2022. It happened mostly after 2014. So while we can't know the figures, well, some of the figures, we can see the tendencies. And while we can't accurately judge of the amount, we can judge of the trend. That's what I think. So the Ministry of Finance that has been anxious to somehow keep military spending in check, and that has been trying in its budgetary plans because we have officially a 3 years budgetary planning. We have detailed budget for next year and then planning for the next 2 years. So Ministry of Finance has been trying to induce the rest of the government and of course the president to agree to a lower military spending every next year. This has not been happening. Of course, the opposite has been happening since 2022. But in 2026, as compared to the current year, there is no increase. That is their victory. So the message from the financial economic bloc, as we call it, as I read it, is this: we can finance your shenanigans for another year, but
we're not going to up the expense.
Yes, please don't. Please don't jump your game. So we don't know whether this message will be at all regarded by the political leadership, because the Ministry of Finance and the Central Bank and the Ministry of Economic Development and all the other formerly liberals, now technocrats, can only do as much. They can send signals in the hope of being listened to, or in the hope of keeping their place, despite sending signals that the political leadership clearly doesn't enjoy receiving. But this is what we have. I can't say that there's anything positive to be read from the federal budget, but at least
it's a relief that it hasn't gone up.
It could have been worse. Is it the only kind of relief we're going to get these days? It could have been worse.
Yeah.
It can always get worse.
It still can. But there's also this thing that you say, things will first get worse before they start getting better.
They've been getting worse for quite a long time
I know.
now.
So I don't know if you've reached that point where it has reached like the maximum, deepest level of worse for it to start getting better. I'm not sure about that.
The very popular Russian phrase in recent years has been, there is no bottom. So when you think you have reached the bottom...
It's a bottomless pit.
Yes, it is. There is no bottom.
So I have one question about the social spending and the demography that you addressed. So I'm imagining there is a huge gap of people who are working in the workforce, or there will be an increasing gap. And that just doesn't concern industrial sectors. It also concerns the army. So I think briefly we have skirted with the issue of the conscription in the past. It wasn't mandatory at that point.
No,
when we last addressed it. But do you think it will come?
Not.
Because the war effort has gone for far too long than anyone had imagined.
Yes.
Now the economy is kind of shifting gears. If at some point do you see two questions? So do you see the context of forced labor / forced conscription coming into effect? And the second thing is, do you see any signals of, like if we were to read tea leaves, because we don't have tea today, do you see the possibility of shifting gears to a war economy? Because then I think all brakes are off and you just go into a nose deep, like a deep dive.
Well, the militarized patriots have been clamoring for both mobilization and enforced labor and nationalization of assets, and of course putting the economy on war rails fully and completely, embracing the militarization for months and now I think years. But our leadership has been characteristically, and I would say familiarly,
peaceful,
vacillating. So they want to both have their cake and eat it, and they have kind of managed this. So conscription and contracting with the Ministry of Defense is voluntary, and there's been a regular increase of payments. But in recent, not months, but weeks, there has been a curious tendency in the regions to actually lower those payments. This is an interesting...
These payments are to what impact? Like what payments are we talking
They are
to?
payments for those who sign a contract with the Ministry of Defense. This is how the state buys its cannon fodder, by paying them more and more money. But now in some regions, we're witnessing a decrease of these payments, because the larger share of these payments come from the regional administrations and they have to find money for this. To be fair, in other regions, although of lesser number, there's been an increase as well. But there is more information now about regions that are decreasing these payments. Why does this happen? This can be due to various courses. We don't really know. They can be running out of money and petitioning the federal center for lower KPIs on enrollment, saying we can't give people any more money. Or the hostilities being at the point they are at, there may be, but I can't really imagine there's a lower appetite for people in the army, because the way the Russian army progresses is the way of the so-called meat storms, when small groups of people are sent again and again and again to secure certain positions. They're getting killed, new people come on. And so this is the way to, deceive the drone army by just feeding it a person at a time. This is what modern warfare, as they tell us, now looks like. So perhaps this happens in those regions that have been stripped of their manfolk for a long time enough for the federal center to be afraid of social consequences. But again, these are just working hypotheses. These are just guesses, educated guesses, if you like, made by educated people, but still we don't have information. We previously had statistics about the second quarter of this year, and it showed a much lower number of contract signers, which was surprising at that moment. And I was asked for comments, and I said, we can't draw conclusions from a one-time drop or jump in statistics. This may be just some, I don't know.
Like a momentary.
Yes, it may be momentary. It may be a calculating mistake. It may be anything. So we have to wait for at least the next quarter. But now this next quarter is also over. Soon we're going to get, hopefully, new statistics, despite of all attempts to conceal information. And then we will see. But I do have a sense, are experts supposed to have senses and feelings and premonitions of things, that something is, I can't say that something is seriously wrong with the system, but maybe it's making clumsy attempts to economize on the resources that it has been spending so freely and so lavishly during these 3.5 years. Maybe either in the expectation of there being more time before them when they have to spend the same resources, so they maybe should be more sparing of them, or conversely, maybe in the expectation of the war soon coming to a slower phase, if not actually being over. So why spend money that we will need for post-war restorations or whatever? So this is my idea.
So this is where you see your country standing right now.
Yes.
On the inside. I know you don't like to venture guesses into foreign policy, but we cannot not talk about the visit of Mr. Putin to his friend Xi Jinping in Beijing.
To celebrate the victory in the Second World War, which, as now everyone knows, was actually achieved by China.
Yeah. So what was the response within the Russian sphere on that? Because as it happened, the Indian Prime Minister also happened to be there.
Yes.
And this time, I think the optics were a little different than the usual optics, because on the one hand, parts of this world want the Indian Prime Minister, whoever that may be. And this I'm saying very specifically, that regardless of whoever would have been in power, I think that person would have been forced to look for other partners, because President Trump is really, really making it very hard for an economy like the Indian economy to survive. So when you impose tariffs, we started the conversation with tariffs. So with 50% tariffs looming on the horizon and having the pressure to keep up the economy up at between 6 to 7% to sustain a growth phase, not even like grow, to just sustain that phase, you have to have partners. And by cutting out the entire Trump conversation, India is really caught in a very, very difficult situation. The Europeans are trying to come up with very quick plans, but it's not sufficient. It's putting small band-aids on holes on the wall. So of course he felt very pressurized to go there, and he did. He's also been reaching out to other partners in the region. So this is the context from which the Indian conversation was emerging.
And then what he got for his pains was this post on Truth Social about China and India and Russia going to hell together with their failing economies, which was a broad and sweeping generalization, even for that particular blogger.
Exactly. So this was the perception coming out of India about, regardless of which part of the political spectrum you find yourself on, this is a situation where potentially any political leader would have responded to this situation in a similar fashion. So what was the impression from within Russia? I know you guys did not talk much about the Indian aspect of the conversation, but your president was there as well.
Indian presence was noted, and it was, of course, much lauded by the Russian state media as a kind of conference of the majority of the world.
Of the emerging leaders.
Of the emerging leaders of the globe. And here they are representing, again, the majority of the world's population, the majority of the world's economy, and leaving the puny and declining West far, far behind. But now that some time have passed since this event, these celebrations tend to age rather quickly.
Or sometimes they also age like wine.
Sometimes they do, but I don't think this is exactly this case. You know what? Our political system runs very much on producing impressions rather than substances. So what both our president and the media machine that serves him do extremely well is creating these gala events or participating in other people's gala events and selling them to the audience as victories. So the visit to Alaska was another such thing. Now that time has passed and we have more information available for us post factum, we see that it was more of a flop than of a victory. But at the moment, it was a triumph. And why was it a triumph? Because there was a red carpet involved. So the Beijing visit was a triumph. Why was it a triumph? Because there were a lot of other leaders of other countries that were present there.
Making the point that Russia is not as isolated as the West wants to believe.
And these triumphs, I accept it as such, even by oppositional or independent media saying, well, yes, for whatever we can say about Mr. Putin, he's very good at breaking the international isolation imposed upon Russia. But then a week comes and another couple of weeks and a month or so, and looking back, if we ever look back on anything that is older than 15 minutes, we can't even remember what was the actual tangible outcome, substantial result of all those foreign policy triumphs. What did he bring to Russia out of Beijing? No new contracts were signed, different types of contracts, not contracts with the Russian military. But there were, as far as I understand, attempts to sell a new pipeline to China, and that, I can say it failed. I don't know enough about the matter to affirm that much, but it certainly did not materialize. So there were some declarations, but no signed papers.
So lots of intent, but no content.
A lot of impressions, a lot of window dressing, a lot of parade, but not much to show for the money. For a political scientist watching informational autocracies, this is very typical. They exist by producing series of eye-catching events. It's interesting that the current American political situation rather reminds me of the same tendency that
flooding the zone.
That used to be peculiar to autocracies, because democracies were boring but substantial. Their politics were not theatrical.
No,
there were very little thespian excitement going on, but there were regulations, procedures, norms, etc., all sorts of boring bureaucratic stuff that resulted in actual effects on people's lives,
on real lives.
But autocracies produced festivals or disasters. It doesn't really matter so long as you keep your narcissistic theater going. But autocracies are still work like this, but now I see some signs of the same thing, at least in America.
And I think there's also an additional level that autocracies not only just create festivals, I think they create festivals around specific leitmotifs, like the construct of an identity. So you have to celebrate something. And
Yes.
what better than to gather people under one umbrella of we are Russians or we are Indians, you know. And I
And
think
let's celebrate something that happened 80 years ago.
exactly.
And with which we really have very little connection.
Yeah. But I think that's how it works, right? Because you have to offer something as a narrative. Otherwise, the narrative won't fly. So I think that's also a key part. So as opposed to a functional democracy, where, like which you likely said, is very boring. It's very dull because, you know, people talk about procedures and getting lost in legislations. Your favorite topic, but not something which is
not
accessible
everybody's
to
piece of cake, I know.
So I think people really they don't find the narrative as to why is this important? Why should I care? And autocracies do that job beautifully. And I'm not just pointing in the direction of a particular country. Also, the country that we find ourselves in right now is not completely free of that.
Some theatricals are necessary for public political life. In a functional democracy, electoral periods are exactly for this. So you can have your little carnival.
Yeah, but then you can have the 3.5, 4, 5 years of peace in between.
And boredom, refreshing, delightful boredom.
Yeah, but that's not here to happen. And I'm saying this because, and I brought up China as well, because quite recently I had the chance to be a part of a thought exercise where you do some kind of forecasting or, you know, foresighting, trying not to look in terms of the predictability aspect of it, but the plausibility aspect of it. So it's a very fine differentiation between what's probable and what's plausible. And one of the plausible scenarios is indeed that the relationship between China and Russia, however twisted it is, could actually evolve into something which becomes a bigger headache for the West. And then it's like kind of and I'm at the cost of sounding very provocative. You're looking at kind of a proxy war kind of a situation where you have two fronts being put up by two people or two egomaniacs, but two countries who have a lot to lose but also a lot to gain, propping up this kind of a conflict not on their own land but somewhere completely different.
It's quite one of the popular conspiracy theories in Russia among the disgruntled militarists that this is actually the fight between the West and China. So the West is fighting with Ukraine and and China is fighting with Russia.
But is that like a conspiracy theory that is like taken with a pinch of salt? Or because, you know, we often ponder about how much element of truth is in there and how much element of wondering is in there.
It depends on the person's degree of craziness, I suppose. So whether you have a pinch of salt to add to a conspiracy theory of your choice, or you swallow it whole.
As is.
As is, yeah, no spice added. But the idea that China, which the Russians regard with habitual fear rather than trust, is content with having these two Slavic nations kill each other, and then they will snatch the weakest. It's, for some reason, it's the Russian idea that China is after Russia's natural resources. The fact that China is extremely rich in the natural resources
and
of its
that
own.
at rare earths.
Yes, including this new idol of our century, the rare earth metals. It has quite a lot of them, actually. That doesn't come into the heads of an average Russian, because an average Russian considers Russia to be the one and only blessed by nature country in the world. While in fact, putting aside oil and gas, which are all very nice substances, in terms of agriculturally usable land and general climate fitness for human life, we are not blessed at all. We have a lot of territory, but the percentage of that territory which is inhabitable, yes, is actually quite small. As I have, I think, remarked previously, in this respect, we resemble Canada very much, which is also an oil and gas rich country. So you can never exactly determine the degree of trust with which a person considers their pet conspiracy theory. But this China conspiracy that I have try to describe is, I think, quite popular. So this also returns us to a question of how this China visit was perceived. On one hand, see our guy is being respected all over the world, see how he's being greeted. So that's a good thing, especially if you watch state TV and that's about all you know. On the other hand, we don't trust these Chinese. They are after our Mother Earth and the rare earth metals hidden therein. And also Russian culture as such being European, and it cannot be anything else, there is an idea that we can't actually turn into a pro-China civilization, pro-China country all of a sudden. So it was a mixed signal. Russian society in general is now so hungry for any hope of stopping this war, if not actually eliminating it, at least putting it on pause.
Has it reached that point that it's calling it a war now?
It has reached the point where for many months now, I think for more than a year, a very stable and growing majority of respondents are saying that they will support negotiations over continuing warfare. This is the point we are in.
That's still a big step.
Yes. But we've been there for, as I said, more than a year now. It has had no perceptible effect on the decisions taken by the Russian leadership. But I do think that it is a kind of part of a general social atmosphere, and as such, it affects the people, including those people who are supposed to sign the contracts, and the bureaucracy who are supposed to gently shoo them in the direction of Voenkomat, and the same bureaucracy that is supposed to do the actual running of the country and keeping it functional on shortened rations. So it's been a seeping effect. I do see how it actually changes the general mood of the country. The only person who is full of optimism and the desire to go on with the warfare, which he considers to be extremely successful, seems to be the president. I haven't seen anyone else being overtly optimistic, but that's the advantage of being an autocrat. You can inhabit your own information bubble and no one will come and knock at your window.
Yeah, talking about information bubbles. So I think I've lost track of how often President Trump has gone on record and said, India, I think he keeps alternating between India will not buy any oil from China, from Russia anymore, and that he was the one instrumental in stopping the war between India and Pakistan. And I think it's
and between Albania and Azerbaijan.
I haven't followed up the other conflicts because flooding the zone, at some point you just like, you can't keep looking at that same face with just different words coming out over and over and over again. But I think now it's reached a point where it's very difficult to, I actually have to check when was this piece published, because for all I know, it's the same piece that has been like reused over the past 2 weeks.
So you represent Indian expertise here in this room. Tell me, have you promised to stop buying oil from Russia, or have you not?
No. So the Ministry of External Affairs also has been like trying to make this point that there is no credible information that points to the fact that India will stop buying oil from Russia. And I think it will be political suicide for anyone to consider that, because India cannot afford to do that right now. And at the cost of, irking the one partner, which has proven reliable. The US hasn't. The West is like sometimes in, sometimes out. So it's like really, we keep returning to this metaphor of a bad relationship. It's like a situationship, with the US. Like, for all you know, it could go well, but for all you know, it can also come back to bite you. So after all this, bromance for like last 6-7 years over the first term of President Trump, and howdy Modi and welcome Trump and all of that, I think the camaraderie has like kind of cooled down a little bit. It has cooled off.
Love lives for 3 years. Bromances live for how long? For one presidential term or less?
Yeah, maybe, I don't know.
A half?
So I think India cannot also afford to do that, to kind of irk the one reliable partner for what it's worth. It's not an easy ride to be on your side in this Pacific.
So, dear viewers and listeners, here we have the first-hand information, absolutely reliable, from a source you habitually trust, as well you may. So India is not stopping to buy
for the time being.
Russia oil. At least, yes,
I
for
will
the
not
time being.
count my chickens before they hatch.
Yes. So sorry to break it to you, but don't trust every social media post that you see out there, even if it's been authored by the current president of the United States. And here we are unboxing Russia and India, uncovering conspiracy theories, generally bringing forth the truth to the light of day.
Yes.
And planning, now that we're back from our, as you said, much earned, summer, early autumn break, which was actually no break at all in all the other respects.
Yeah.
So now we're back, and we plan to be back on our usual schedule, which is
every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks. With so much matter to talk about and so many things happening.
This was just a quick recap of last 2 months.
That was a recap, as usually happens at the start of a new season of any series. And our particular series has also reached another season with your help and support and approval and attention. Dear audience, we plan to keep going.
Yeah. And let us know what you would like us to talk about the next time. Looking forward. Thank you for joining us.
See you soon. Thank you.